Hi, I'm Dr. Susan Collins and I'm one of the Chief Investigators on the Fostering Lifelong Connections for Children in Permanent Care study funded by the Australian Research Council. This video shares practice learnings and resources developed to support practice around hearing the voices of children and young people about family time. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge that wherever we're coming from today, we're meeting on traditional lands that have been unceded, and to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging of all the lands on which we meet, including the campuses on which the University of Sydney stands, and to thank them for their continued care and custodianship of country. So this video, as I said, is about hearing children's voices about family time. This is a really important area of practice in family time research because it's both enshrined in the Convention on the Rights of the Child, that children have a right to participate in decisions and be heard about things that are important to them in their lives. And this right is particularly important for children and young people in out-of-home care, about who they see and how much time and how they get to spend time with important birth family members. We know that sometimes contact arrangements are included in contact plans made by the court or care plans made by agencies, and then refined through an annual process of review between carers, birth family members and agency workers. And sometimes children and young people are not heard directly in those spaces and places. So this practice was about bringing intentional focus to how caseworkers individually working with children and families could bring greater attention to involving children and young people in those decisions, and really then how they might take on board that feedback and incorporate it into future plans for family time. So what we worked on for about 8 months with 2 teams was looking at involving children and young people more closely in what family time looks like for them. And this intersects with many other practice resources you can find on the website, but specifically those action researchers who worked with us thought about what they could do this week and next week and then reflected on that learning. And one of the examples that came up was a case study of, we'll call him Zach. Zach's a 14-year-old boy who's living with his maternal auntie in a long-term kinship care placement. He hasn't seen his dad or his siblings related to his father for a very long time. They live interstate and there's some issues between the two sides of the family. His auntie has concerns about his safety, and this has prevented him having that contact. By setting up informal but regular conversations with Zach, his caseworker over time came to learn that Zach was longing to be reconnected with his dad and his siblings, and that he didn't have a way to express that wish. So his caseworker then set up a meeting with his carer and gently and sensitively worked through her issues about Zach seeing his family, his dad and his siblings interstate. She developed a plan, including a safety plan, for Zach to travel interstate with a worker so that he could spend time with his family and reconnect and rekindle that relationship. She also worked with Zach's family in the interstate location to make that practically possible, and reassured his carer of what steps had been put in place. So his first visit happened without a hitch and was a wonderful opportunity for Zach. And it was so good that now he travels interstate every school holidays to spend time with his dad and his siblings. And in between times, so much as their relationship been rekindled, they keep in contact by phone. so that they have those regular virtual contact opportunities in addition to the visits. So what we learned through this practice over a period of time was, for caseworkers, really just that small shift in focusing on finding opportunities to talk to children and young people separately from their carers, was that they had very different perspectives often on who was important in their life and who they wanted to see more of, and what their views were of family time, what they wanted to see changed. Sometimes the carers were then surprised to hear what the children or young person in their care thought about family time. So it really opened up these conversations and provided children with a valuable opportunity to feel heard and to learn to more confidently express their views. Those regular conversations with caseworkers help build up rapport between the caseworker and the child or young person too, especially as, like Zach, children enter adolescence and are approaching leaving care. This is really important for them to have those opportunities to learn how to speak up and be heard about what's important, and to build that confidence and trust in workers, that workers aren't just there for their carers, and that actually those children, young people, can actually be responsible for making changes to things in their own lives. So the tips we want to share through this project are, think about the questions you're asking. So you're creating that opportunity to spend time with a child or young person, and then thinking about how to scaffold those questions to their age, life stage and developmental ability, taking into account communication styles, needs and impairments. So rather than asking a question like, how is everything going? Literally just invites a yes or no answer, digging into it a bit and saying, when was the last time you ... And that gives the child or young person a chance to really think and to feel like the question isn't just a rote question being asked of them, but actually it's a genuine inquiry and it's coming to them with openness and curiosity. Ask them regularly what their wishes are. Start involving them in some of the conversations and decisions, involving them in conversations about why it might be difficult to implement some of the suggestions they've made, and what sort of workarounds there can be, because they might surprise you with some of the ideas they have. And it really starts to bring them into the conversation, especially as they're reaching adulthood and they are going to be responsible for managing and pursuing those relationships without the support of carers oftentimes. So again, thinking about the specific needs of a specific child, how to understand their communication needs, and learn from them, take their lead, find creative ways to talk to them and make those opportunities less formal, because we know that children and young people can often feel that they're being disloyal if they say something about their birth family and wanting to see them. It depends a lot on, and it can also create those opportunities for them to have deeper conversations with carers about who they're missing from their family. The carers may not know because the child hasn't felt they could speak up. Manage expectations. It's important to hear from children, but it's not always possible to put into action the things they've asked for. So help them understand what is possible and what is not possible, so you're not creating expectations that can't be fulfilled. Finally, I want to share 2 amazing books that were created as part of this project through our Expert by Experience reference group, who really felt that there was often a very adult-centric view of family time, and that the views of children and young people were not routinely sought. So 2 people on our expert reference group with a care experience themselves went away and developed books to speak to this gap in understanding how to communicate with children, and for children and young people to learn how to communicate about their needs more fully in the context of out-of-home care. The first one is called Raw, and it's illustrated and written by Billy Black, and it's the story of a young it's the story of a young cub who and his big emotions around seeing his lion dad, and how caseworkers and carers, a gorilla and a bear, can help that child process and understand their big emotions and make the most and create the most enjoyable opportunities for that young cub to spend time with his or her lion dad. There's an adult guide, so there's a terrific guide for adults in supporting the use of this book with children to start to build their vocabulary and skills to speak about their big feelings and start to understand them. The second resource is a book for probably aged about 12 and up year old young people, and it's really designed to answer all their questions and equip them to start to take control over what they want from family time. It's written and created by Bobby Hendry, our second expert by experience, who had a care experience herself. And this is really targeted at that youth audience and really full of tips and tricks and guides for understanding how trauma and stress can be reactivated around family time, and how young people can start to understand, why their brain works in certain ways, how trauma impacts on the brain, and start to learn skills to regulate, self-regulate, including terrific playlists for different fight, flight, freeze and fawn trauma states that a young person may identify are the ones that they commonly experience. So it's a really terrific resource and very readable and accessible for those audiences aged around adolescence. And before I finish, I just wanted to share a reflective exercise that you might want to do individually and as groups in your organisation, to think about a young person or a child you're working with, and have you ever collected feedback directly from them about family time? And if you have, what did you learn? Was it surprising? What sort of things did they share with you? And what did you do with that information? How did it impact on the decisions you were making with adults in their lives? This is a really important learning, is that children and young people often are assumed to the adults are assumed to be acting in their best interests, and of course they are acting in their best interests, but for children and young people, they may well have a really valuable contributions to what is in their own interests as well that are not always heard. And this is specifically an issue around their relationships with family, and can be a great strengthener for their relationships with carers and their connections to caseworkers while they are in care. So I'd encourage you to visit our website, where you can learn much, much more about this project and see a raft of resources that were built as part of this process with our experts by experience and our team of 33 action researchers, as well as our academic researchers. It's a fabulous project, and I would love you to visit those and use those resources. Thanks very much for your time.